Welcome to Leadership with Purpose.
Uh-huh.
Today we are really going to dive deep into this idea that you don't need some fancy title to be a leader, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be the CEO or the manager.
Right.
You've shared some super interesting stuff with me, and it looks like we're going to be focusing mostly on this book, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge by Clay Scroggins.
That's right. Yeah.
So what we're going to do in this deep dive is we're going to try to pull out the most important ideas from this book and really try to figure out how can you increase your influence and make a real difference.
Yeah.
No matter what your current position is, whether you are, an intern or the CEO, this is going to apply to everybody.
Yeah. And I think this is a really good way to think about it. Like just a shortcut to understanding leadership in any environment you're in, right? Like you don't have to go to business school or anything like that.
Right.
We're going to give you the shortcut here.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got a lot of great insights from Scroggins' work that we're going to dig into today.
Okay.
And I think what we really want to do is distill these principles, boil them down to their essence.
Okay.
And then the best part is we're going to show you how to actually apply these in your daily interactions. So this isn't just theory.
Right.
We're going to get really practical here.
Love it.
So what we're doing is we're really moving beyond that traditional idea that leadership is all about, having authority.
Right.
And we're going to focus on what really makes someone influential,
Okay.
regardless of their position.
So one of the first things that Scroggins talks about is this myth of authority.
Yeah.
And I think we've all seen this,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
where you've got people in positions of power who don't really inspire or guide anybody.
Yeah.
And then you've got other people, who don't have any formal authority,
Right.
but they have a huge impact.
Huge impact.
So what is he talking about there with that?
Yeah. So what Scroggins is doing here is he's challenging this very common belief that authority and leadership are the same thing.
Right.
Right. Like,
Right.
just because you have the title doesn't automatically make you a good leader.
Yeah.
So he points out that, a lot of people have authority,
Uh-huh.
but they actually lack real influence.
Right.
Right. They might be able to tell people what to do,
Yeah.
but people aren't really inspired by them.
Uh-huh.
They're not motivated by them.
Yeah.
And he makes this really crucial distinction between positional authority, which is what you get from your role, your title, and earned influence, which
Yeah.
comes from, your actions and the relationships you build.
Right.
So it's not about the title, it's about how you actually interact with people.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like what he's saying is leadership isn't something you just achieve when you get promotion.
Right.
It's more like a skill that you develop over time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a journey.
Okay.
It's not a destination.
Okay, so let's talk about how to develop that skill, right?
Yeah.
How do you become that kind of leader who has real influence?
Yeah. So this is where Scroggins introduces this really powerful framework.
Okay.
He calls it the 4 pillars of influence.
4 pillars of influence.
These are the essential elements for leading effectively, even when you don't have that formal authority, right?
Okay.
So these pillars, they're kind of like the foundation
Okay.
upon which you can build your influence.
All right, so what's the first pillar?
The first pillar is clarity.
Clarity.
And I love this one because it really emphasizes the importance of communication.
Okay.
So even if you're not the one setting the overall direction, maybe you don't have that big vision.
Right.
You can still provide clarity within your own sphere of influence.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Right.
So this means being able to articulate goals and expectations really effectively, making sure everyone on your team understands what they're working towards.
Yeah.
And it also means being able to simplify complex ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can explain things in a way that everyone understands, that's when people really start to buy in.
Right.
So it's about making that path forward super clear for everyone you're interacting with.
Okay, so that's clarity. What's the second pillar?
The second pillar is competence.
Competence.
And this one might seem pretty obvious,
Yeah.
but it's so important.
Okay.
You have to be good at what you do.
Right.
If you want people to trust you, if you want them to follow your lead,
Uh-huh.
you have to demonstrate expertise.
Okay.
You have to consistently deliver high-quality work.
Yeah.
And this comes from mastering your skills, being committed to continuous learning,
Right.
because the world's changing so fast.
Yeah.
You always have to be learning and growing.
Okay. Competence. Super important. What about the third pillar?
The third pillar is character.
Character.
And I think this one is really the foundation of everything, right?
Yeah.
It's about integrity.
Uh-huh.
It's about trustworthiness.
Yeah.
It's about ethical behavior.
Right.
You can have all the clarity and competence in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but if you don't have a strong ethical base, any influence you have is going to be really short-lived.
Right.
People might follow you for a little while,
Yeah.
but if they don't trust you, they're not going to stick around.
Yeah, they're going to see right through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So character is about building those deep, lasting relationships that are based on mutual respect and honesty.
Okay, so that's character, the third pillar. What about the fourth one?
The fourth pillar is courage.
Courage. Okay.
And, when people think of courage, they often think about these grand gestures,
Right, right.
like, standing up to a bully or, quitting your job to start your own business.
Yeah.
But Scroggins talks about courage in a much more everyday sense.
Okay.
It's about those small acts of bravery
Mm-hmm.
that we can all do every day.
Okay.
So things like taking initiative,
Yeah.
speaking up when you see something that's not right,
Uh-huh.
demonstrating resilience when things get tough.
Okay. Yeah.
It's about overcoming that fear
Right.
that holds us back so often
Right.
and being willing to take risks.
Okay, so we've got these four pillars: clarity, competence, character, and courage. Those are the foundations of influence. Now, how do we actually apply that influence in our daily lives?
Yeah, that's the key question, right?
Right.
So Scroggins talks about how to use these pillars to lead in 3 different directions: up, sideways, and down.
Up, sideways, and down. Okay.
Oh.
So leading up would be influencing your boss or your
Yeah,
superior.
exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Managing up.
Managing up. So how do we do that effectively?
Yeah, so Scroggins suggests a really proactive approach.
Okay.
It's not about, being a yes man or just blindly agreeing with everything your boss says.
Right.
It's about actually supporting them,
Okay.
empowering them to be better leaders.
So how do you do that?
So this means, anticipating their needs,
Mm-hmm.
proactively offering solutions instead of just pointing out problems,
Right.
contributing valuable insights based on your own unique perspective.
Okay. So it's really about making their jobs easier.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And when you do that, it builds a much stronger, more positive working relationship.
Okay.
And communication is so key here.
Right.
Being open and honest with your manager,
Uh-huh.
understanding their priorities,
Right.
and then figuring out how you can use your skills and your influence to help them achieve those goals.
Okay.
So it becomes this really collaborative relationship.
Got it. So that's leading up. What about leading sideways?
Leading sideways is all about influencing your peers,
Okay.
those people who are at the same level as you in the organization.
Right.
And I think the key here is building strong collaborative relationships.
Okay.
So, fostering a supportive work environment,
Huh?
offering assistance when your colleagues need it,
Yeah.
sharing your knowledge, your expertise freely,
Yep.
and celebrating their successes.
Yeah.
When you do all those things, it builds trust,
Okay.
and it creates this willingness to work together.
And if you've already built those strong relationships based on those four pillars we talked about earlier, your peers are much more likely to be open to your ideas and your input.
They're going to trust you.
Okay.
They're going to respect you.
Right. So leading up, leading sideways, what about leading down?
Leading down, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because Scroggins points out that you can lead down even if you don't have direct reports.
Right.
You don't have to be the manager
Yeah. Okay.
to have a leadership impact on the people around you.
Okay. So how do you do that?
So this is about taking on a mentorship role,
Okay.
maybe a coaching role with your colleagues.
Uh-huh.
So sharing your expertise, providing guidance, offering encouragement,
Right.
and really looking for opportunities for others to learn and grow. And in this context, active listening and giving constructive feedback are super important.
Okay.
So, really taking the time to listen to your colleagues,
Uh-huh.
understand their challenges,
Yeah.
and then offering them thoughtful feedback that can help them improve.
Okay.
So it's all about investing in the growth and development of the people around you.
So it's almost like you're helping them become leaders themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. You're empowering them.
I love that.
You're helping them reach their full potential.
Okay, so that's leading down. Scroggins also talks about the power of questions.
Yes, he does.
And it's not just about having all the answers yourself.
Right.
It's about asking the right questions.
All right.
So what does he mean by that?
Yeah, so Scroggins really emphasizes this idea of moving beyond those superficial questions,
Okay.
right? The ones that just scratch the surface
Right.
and really trying to dig deeper
Uh-huh.
to understand the underlying issues
Okay.
The different perspectives, the motivations that are driving people's actions,
Okay.
and asking questions that challenge assumptions,
Uh-huh.
that encourage critical thinking.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, you can really steer conversations in a more productive direction.
Right.
And you can empower people to come up with their own solutions.
So it's not about telling people what to do.
Right.
It's about helping them figure it out for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about clarity, competence, character, courage, leading up, sideways, and down, and the power of questions. What else does Scroggins talk about?
One more really important concept is this idea of embracing ownership.
Embracing ownership. Okay.
And this is about taking full responsibility for your actions and your contribution, regardless of your title, regardless of your position.
Okay.
So, even if something isn't technically your job,
Right.
if you see a problem, you take initiative.
All right.
You address it. You
Yeah.
don't just say, oh, that's not my responsibility.
Right.
You step up. You take ownership.
Yeah.
And this also means demonstrating a commitment to excellence,
Okay.
going above and beyond,
Yeah.
not just doing the bare minimum,
Right.
but really striving to do your best work all the time.
Okay, so that's embracing ownership. And I love that idea because it really shows initiative.
Yeah.
It shows that you're invested in the success of the team.
It does. And Scroggins also talks about this idea of cultivating a culture of influence
Right.
within a workplace.
Okay.
So it's not enough for just one person to be leading without authority.
Right.
We need to create an environment where this kind of leadership is valued
Okay.
and encouraged.
So how do we do that?
So this means recognizing and rewarding people who demonstrate leadership qualities, even if they don't have those formal titles.
Okay.
It means creating an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas,
Uh-huh.
where collaboration is the norm,
Right.
and where people feel empowered to take initiative and make a difference.
So it's about creating a culture where everyone feels like they can be a leader.
Exactly. And of course, leading without authority isn't always easy.
Right.
There are going to be challenges.
Okay, like what?
So you might face resistance from people who do have formal authority.
Right.
They might feel threatened
Yeah.
by your initiative.
Right.
You might encounter skepticism from your peers.
Uh-huh.
They might not understand what you're trying to do.
Right.
And you might even struggle with your own self-doubt.
Yeah.
Those voices in your head that tell you, you're not qualified or you're not good enough.
Right. Right.
But Scroggins offers some really practical strategies for overcoming these obstacles.
Okay, like what?
So one is to build alliances.
Okay.
Find people who support you,
Uh-huh.
who believe in your vision,
Right.
and who are willing to work with you to make a difference.
Okay. Yeah.
Another strategy is to just keep demonstrating your confidence.
Right.
Let your actions speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Over time, people will come to see that you're capable and that you're trustworthy.
Okay, that makes sense. And what you were talking about earlier, that emotional intelligence piece.
Yeah.
That's got to be super important in these situations too, right?
It's absolutely crucial
Okay.
because you're going to encounter difficult people. You're going to encounter difficult situations.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to manage your own emotions.
Okay.
You need to be able to understand the emotions of the people around you.
Right.
And you need to be able to navigate those tricky interpersonal dynamics.
So what Scroggins is really saying is that leadership isn't about your title.
Right.
It's not about your position.
It's about your impact.
It's about how you interact with people.
Yeah.
And it's about the difference that you make in the world.
And that's something that anyone can do,
Right.
regardless of their role.
Okay, so to wrap up, what are the biggest takeaways from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that leadership is not about a title.
Right.
It's about action.
Okay.
It's about influence.
Uh-huh.
It's about making a positive impact on the people around you.
Right.
And that's something that anyone can do no matter where they are in their career.
Okay.
So if you're feeling stuck,
Uh-huh.
if you're feeling like you don't have any influence,
Yeah.
just remember those 4 pillars.
Clarity, competence, character, and courage.
Exactly. Focus on developing those qualities
Okay.
and start leading from where you are.
So even small actions can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
All right. That is amazing. Well, thank you so much for this incredible deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
This was super insightful, and I hope that everyone listening feels really empowered to go out there and lead with purpose no matter what their position is. So if you enjoyed this deep dive, please like it, subscribe to our channel, and support us so we can keep making more of this great content. And we'll see you next time on Leadership with Purpose.
Take care.